Hello, good evening, and welcome to a brand new episode of TattvaTalks. To begin with, I'd like to begin with a quote of Mr. Ratan Tata that says, "I don't believe in taking right decisions. I take decisions and make them right." So Desmond, according to you, being an entrepreneur all these years, what do you think is the foremost quality one should possess to actually become an entrepreneur?
I can only talk about what I have been in terms of entrepreneurship. I used to be a software entrepreneur in the US, and now I'm a craft alphabet entrepreneur in India. In software, the foremost quality is identifying an underserved problem area and creating a user-friendly solution to the same. But in craft alphabet in India, the foremost quality is the kind of passionate madness to work your way through never-ending obstacles, especially if you have an obstinate integrity not to breeze your way through them.
So, Terence, let's think about how people view startups these days, right? So, I set up my first fund back in 2009. And that was a time when people were not willing, especially middle-class parents, weren't willing to give their daughters in marriage to a startup founder, right? So, very different world. So, startup founders have got that little bit of a cult status in the eyes of the public. But just talking about startups and founders themselves, the maturity level has increased significantly over the last 10 years or so. Thanks also to people like Desmond who come back from the US, from very entrepreneurial culture, creating some of that culture here and looking out. But also Indian entrepreneurs have learned a lot of things along the way, right? And have matured. I guess the flip side is they've all learned to pitch extremely well. So for guys like us, it was a lot easier to figure out who were startups earlier. The difference was large. Now you need to peel through many layers of the onion before you can figure out.
Have you seen a Hanuman poster?
Yeah.
When he rips his chest open, what is inside it?
It's Ram and Sita, Lord Ram and Sita.
So that's what he needs. He needs the flag of India on his heart.
Flag of India on his products, yes.
So when you do Hanuman, it means that you firstly are hugely tenacious, and secondly, you have to be the best judge of the value that you bring to the table. Because if an entrepreneur believes that 2 + 2 = 4, he has failed before he has started. If an entrepreneur does not believe that 2 and 2 makes 24, and he has to somehow get to that 24 worth of value in hindsight, if not in foresight, then he's not going to appeal to everybody across the board, because everybody in this country and the world understands one thing: value.
Yeah, so what we do is we make unique spirits in the Indian alcohol scene. We make spirits, liqueurs, and cocktail blends in small batches that are craft and that are based on bouquet spirits. And what we do is, of course, we don't have a surrogate brand, so we cannot do mainstream advertising, but we are big proponents of guerrilla marketing.
This strategy is actually experiential, because unless you actually experience the alcohol on a first or on a taste, smell, like, dislike attitude, you cannot either pass it on to anybody else, nor become a committed, patron of that particular brand of alcohol. Now, though it's a very tried and tested method, it's as old as hat. I mean, long before advertising was actually invented into some kind of a science, this was the way to actually market. Go to market is to do sampling, as many samples across the board as possible.
I think the challenge is really on the product side. Can you, without that low touch, we have a set of extremely strong on soft skills in India. That's something that we play towards. And perhaps it's led to a little bit of a challenge that we've been perceived as being a services back office type of nation, as an IT industry. And therefore it becomes harder for us to be thought of in the global sort of stage as somebody who's going to, create cutting edge tech that is going to solve the deepest problems. We're always perceived as a back office.
I'm thinking, how do you translate something like this to a mutual fund? How do you take something like this to an apparel? How do you take something like this to auto? The core essence. We are here to discover that core essence. Be it DJ and Desmond G's range of alcobevs, be it a tech startup, be it some sort of a product a manufacturer is. How do you exactly get people to fall in love with it? Probably we will answer that if we get to hear Desmond's story in details. So I'm going to come to that part. As you know, probably I think it was 2.5 months ago that our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji actually came and spoke about being Atmanirbhar, right? Self-dependent. And then this entire drive of Swadeshi started. So Desmond, can you tell us, how did you discover how do you chance upon this Mahua discovery of yours?
My first encounter with Mahua, though, happened in 2001 in the vicinity of Daman, off of the border of Gujarat, where I first heard about, looked for and tasted a rather poorly made version of this flower-based distilled spirit. That's how it was discovered by me.
So what exactly is Mahua? Can you tell us what is Mahua?
So Mahua is a spirit made from the sun-dried, nectar-rich flowers of the Mahua tree, which grows primarily in the central Indian forest and almost nowhere else in the world. The Mahua tree flowers for a month during March through May, and roughly between 100 million to 500 million kilograms of Mahua flowers, yeah, that's right, that's million kilograms, are harvested and sold every year. Over 95% of that is turned into spirit by tribal people and consumed by them locally. Moving back to India was a purely personal choice. I felt that India had given me much as a youngster who came from a lower middle class family. And I wanted to give back to India by starting up 5 projects in India that connected India to the rest of the world. So this Mahua story actually is a kind of culmination of that whole thrust from my childhood. Actually, when forests get cleared for agriculture and habitation, Mahua trees are generally left alone because the ownership of the tree is with a given tribal family and it's terribly important to them. Now, the sun-dried flowers, which are harvested in the months of March through May, are a source of ready cash, kind of like an ATM, the tribal people tell me. One Adivasi person told me that 10 good Mahua trees could sustain his family of 4 for a whole year. So for centuries now, central Indian tribes have been consuming a single distilled Mahua spirit made in homemade pot stills. Tribal women have been playing a central role in the Mahua production chain, most importantly in the routine distilling of Mahua. Mahua spirit is the tribal drink of choice for just about every community get-together, whether it's weddings, births, deaths, and other festive occasions. Educated tribals often sell their flowers at a very low price during the flowering season and then buy them back at nearly twice the price off-season. So from the colonial era till today, tribal Mahua spirit has been tightly controlled by authorities, often made illegal and a matter of shame. Even though it plays a key economic and cultural role in the tribal population of tens of millions spread across these 13 or more states. You got that right. So in 2013, when our artisanal agave spirits and other spirits were making national and international waves, we initiated the task of getting the many permissions to make and sell an official Mahua spirit. In parallel, Conrad and I started experimenting with Mahua. We searched hard for Mahua flowers in the year 2013 in rural eastern Maharashtra, where our quest was met with great suspicion by villagers. I have a distinct memory of savoring the first few drops of multiple distilled Mahua that came out of our experimental setup. It was literally a spiritual experience that transported me straight to heaven.
You know, it's been regionalized to such a degree, except for Mahua, as Desmond said, it's across 13 states. So there's a huge widespread consumption of Mahua at tribal levels. But it hasn't really come into mainstream middle class yet, because middle class is still so influenced by IMFL, which is a cheap copy of some foreign liquor. And what we, as a government, what we have failed completely is to turn on and make artisanal alcohol from this country actually the primary alcohols and not cheap Me Too copies of whiskies and things like that.
The British got involved in this in the late 19th century, and starting with what is known as the Abkari Act, where they started looking at revenue potential from alcohol, there was this back and forth along where they mixed revenue with the temperance movement and there was a whole pushback against the so-called local alcohols of India, with an intention to sell the officially made alcohols that British-backed distilleries were making, where they could collect the revenue. So all these traditional alcohols got pushed underground, and there was the famous, infamous, I should call it, 1892 Mahua Act, which literally made the collection, storage of Mahua flowers and the production of Mahua spirit illegal. So we are actually, after 130 years, liberating this amazing spirit, which we consider to be among the most tasty and most versatile spirits in the world, and we are proving it by creating a whole lot of products out of it.
Similarly, we had invested in another startup which is in the medical device space. They have a device for something called fecal incontinence, which is, quote unquote, and pun intended, a shitty product, right? Or a shitty space to be. And they, in fact, designed their product for the Indian body, tried to take it to the US, and then when starting to talk to hospitals over there, realized that they needed to redesign all over again, simply because the American body type was very different from the Indian body type. And so, some of these roadblocks are hard to anticipate, and it's very important that entrepreneurs are nimble to be able to address them as and when they come along. But on the systemic side, right, what are the challenges? What are the more systemic problems, if you would think about? I think first is when we try to go global with tech products, especially anything to do with healthcare or with electronics, you suddenly realize that India, which is fairly unregulated as a market, you're moving from India to a market which is highly regulated. And you need to ensure that you get the right certifications. And that goes a long way in actually helping you make a sale. And so that's, something that a lot of founders find that they're not well enough certified when they're trying to enter global markets. The second part of it is, it's very important to have a strong domestic market to really, be able to spur your product development and product growth. And especially on the B2B side in India, it's, making enterprise sales is extremely difficult. It takes a long time, and you face a lot of challenges trying to sell to Indian enterprises. So that's something that, again, entrepreneurs need to perhaps go through that journey, refine their product before they go into the whole international customer space.
In India, 90% of the startups fail, and in fact, 10% of them fail within the first year itself. While you've told me repeatedly, you deal a lot with tech startups. What if there was, now a lot of our audience over here are from the financial fraternity.
I think the first thing is to be able to try and address a scale market, right? Either you find a market which is large and then address it. Every startup goes through, at least the tech startups go through 3 phases, which is you go through a use case discovery phase, you go through a business model discovery phase, and then finally there's a price discovery phase that you go through. And to be able to understand which is your market, which is large, which is going to be rewarding for the effort you put in terms of the resources you put into it, and then is going to pay you the price that is eventually going to help you scale to a large company. I think it's important to address a sufficiently large market itself. You need to be a big multiple better with the innovation in your offering, simply because it's a little bit of a David versus Goliath type of fight. And so you need to be a large multiple better. So I think do your homework, talk to people, understand what is the scale market that's going to be rewarding, and look around to see who else is there and make sure that you've got to be a significant multiple, better than that.
A lot of risk in business is, you see, today when you have these young startups or these tech startups who are doing apps and things like that, they are forming companies for valuation. And the eventual, aim is to be able to sell your damn company as quickly as possible, get out of it with large amounts of money, much more than what you actually invested in it. Okay, that is not business. When you put your name to a business like Desmond G, you can't sell your company and bugger off because Desmond G goes with the brand.
What I've been observing over the last 10 years, again in India, right, as entrepreneurs in the tech space, is our tech entrepreneurs have actually become far, far bolder. We are more audacious as tech entrepreneurs than we were. I think it's still what remains is investors now matching that level of boldness and having the same level of risk appetite. So I think we as the investor community I agree with you, tend to be very risk averse, and we need to become bold to match the boldness of entrepreneurs.
Tomorrow, which is 5th of September 2020, we will start a series of 21 weeks of learning. We all were talking about certain things which actually needs to be done in each and every business. Same thing is required in the financial sector also. We are observing that to some extent we are unable to scale up. We are unable to reach out to the masses in India. So I think that is the reason this whole 21-week program is about scaling up the business and reaching out to maximum number of people. This particular program which we are starting, already 2,500 financial advisors are registered, and we really hope that in 21 weeks a lot of learnings will happen.
When we speak of entrepreneurs and success stories, more or less you get to people, they'll talk about the Steve Jobs and Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musks and all the people of the world. But then you come to India and you have inspiring stories out here. You don't need to go anywhere. And in fact, I have with me a couple of stories that if you are an IFA, if you are a financial advisor listening, you have your business right now. You're wondering, how do I scale up? Where do I go? A lot of what the panel members spoke today, we will explain to you. We will translate it. We'll decode this into learnings on our pages, so you don't worry about that. We'll show you how this translates to a financial advisor, how it translates to a financial business, and going to mutual funds and insurance, and how do you exactly scale up, develop a niche, develop a demand, increase your affinity. We will explain all of that to you.
But I think Indian entrepreneurs need a special level of grit and determination and persistence if they're not willing to bribe their way through. And it's a story I keep coming back to when people ask me, how was your experience being an entrepreneur in India? And I'd say lousy, because I'm not willing to bribe. And I think that unless you're willing to do that, you have to be a really, really tough character and weather all kinds of storms and be persistent and patient and be willing to actually lose your health, as I did in the interest of my project.
So I'll use the word resilience. We deal with a lot more adversity in India. And if you use the paradigm that adversity leads to a little bit of evolution, I think that's where, be it our educational system, which is far tougher, and then we go study in some other part of the world, tend to do much better there because it's easier, or entrepreneurship. You sell to an Indian customer, an Indian enterprise customer, you go out, it's all downhill from there in terms of, getting into those customers, it's a lot easier. So I think resilience would be the big one as a function of, being in an adverse environment, which is extremely hard. If you succeed here, you'll succeed globally.
Having said that one part, resilience, and then we exactly come across this other key problem, which we've read in a lot of our research, where a lot of Indian startups, and y'all can correct me over here if I'm deviating, is that, they've started to register their units overseas. And then we get to see people over here talking about obtuse tax regulations and the entire bottlenecks. And on the other hand, whenever an Indian startup is going abroad, he's being questioned by hedge fund investors, private blue chip equity about the country of origin and, the stability out there. How does an entrepreneur exactly address these things? Like just in a line, what's the answer he would generally give? Because there does arise this kind of doubt, right? Which is why we see a lot of the Oyo rooms and the Baijus and all, they're registering their new units overseas.
You want to raise capital from outside, big capital, or you want customers who are sitting in other parts of the world. Very often you need to register in that part of the world for that perception that you are from India to sort of not get in your way. And that's the reason why a lot of people do. But on the positive side, I don't think it's about just the entrepreneur. It's also about what's happening in the ecosystem. You have a Chandrayaan, which has happened. You have a Sundar Pichai, who is and many others who are leading very large multinational corporates. You have a couple of unicorns which have really, on the B2B tech space, which have become huge in the US as well and address global markets. I think all of these are sort of stepping stones to changing perception of India itself. And it's going to become a little bit easier for Indian companies to actually work out of India, not register outside, still get capital. There's a lot of money from the US starting to flow into India as well in companies. So this is changing, but it will take its course.
Okay, so we do with a colonial hangover, and that is very evident when it comes to our preference in alcohol. The IMFL or Indian made foreign liquor, or IML, Indian made liquor category, though very strictly regulated, has no manufacturing standards set. And that has allowed the perception that imported spirits are better than Indian made spirits. But Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. At Desmond G, we embody that. We make our spirits, our liqueurs, and our cocktail blends at international standards. We are also a patriotic brand, but our flavor of nationalism is a little different than Patanjali. And I think where we vary now presently is that we are field to bottle, forest to bottle company, and we manufacture and sell all the brands under Desmond G ourselves.
The fact is that if you're going to build a Swadeshi movement of real quality, it has to be a differentiator. The quality is the differentiator, not the fact that it's patriotic or it's made in India or made for India or made by India. If the differentiator is the quality and it is tangible and it becomes word of mouth, then there's an element of great pride and adaptability. So the point is that success has its own dynamics, and success only comes with really great quality.
Act on it. Act on it. Call as many people as you can who know something about that space. Whet your idea. You just had a dream. Now go out and execute. And the best entrepreneurs I found are the ones very rare combination of being both a dreamer as well as a doer. And if you can, marry both those together and keep flipping from one to the other rapidly, then you'll succeed as an entrepreneur.
So I go first a generous measure of resourcefulness, then a measure of authenticity, a couple of dashes of vision, and top it off with large amounts of grit and perseverance.
Now you tell me something from one of your famous taglines. Yeah, tell me something from one of your famous taglines.
Whether it's Yehi a right choice baby, or whether, for instance, if you turn around and say, Pepsi is all about dreams and not about really drinking Pepsi, Dil Mani Mo, then the tagline for Mahua is actually very obvious. The tagline for Mahua is that it is things that has not been invented by us, it was handed down by the gods. We are just.
I was waiting for you to say Zor ka jhatka dhire se lage. So well, that's one key learning which we've been talking, and most important, being an entrepreneur, is being an Indian entrepreneur. We heard resilience. Now this is something I see across the companies I work with, the manufacturing industry, a lot of the startups we have met, and the IFAs, resilience. They don't say no, and that is, I think, the strongest part, the strongest attribute of being an Indian entrepreneur. These are four key learnings we have, which you can use for your business. Well, with that, we come to the end of our show. If you have anything you want to ask our panel, follow us on Facebook, Tattva World. Write to us in the comments, or write to us out there in the messages. I will address it to any one of the panel members, be it Conrad Braganza, Desmond Nazareth, Prahlad Kakkad, or Ashwin Raghuraman. I will make sure they write back to you. You want an opinion from them on your business, on your scale-up strategies, write to us. We will get them to evaluate it and even send you solutions on what best you can do.
There's one factor in the entrepreneur Bible that we sort of left out, and that is ownership. So it's not just physical or the material ownership of what you're doing. It is the emotional and passionate ownership of what you do. Because entrepreneurs don't do a job. Entrepreneurs own the job. That's the difference.
For now, I want to thank the panel, Ashwin, Prahlad, Desmond, and Conrad. Thank you so much for being part of this TattvaTalks. And we hope to do more shows with you in the future. And I thank everyone for logging into this show. So thank you, guys.